Well, March Madness has begun, but no, we're not talking basketball right now. It's the madness in New Orleans to find a new quarterback because it's become official. 15 years after he was announced as the new quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, Drew Brees officially announces his retirement. So much like the Ron Burgundy team, we have assembled the sports team with all my teammates from Saints Tonight. Hey, everybody, I'm Victor Howell. You see joining us, my Super Bowl champ, Scott Shanle, and our Saints insider, Mike Nabors. Mike, let me start with you first, because for the better part of his 15-year career here in New Orleans, you're the one man he has talked to individually after each and every game, win or lose. And I know, down the stretch, you started to ask him a little bit, try to hint at any decisions. He kept telling you, I'm laser focused right now. We'll see what happens. Did you have any indication that you thought this would be it for Drew?
I certainly did. The last time we all talked was after the Bucs lost in the playoffs, and I was in the Superdome and watching Drew throw around with the Suns, and I said, this is the last game he'll ever play. Now, over the past few weeks, I wasn't sure, guys. Brees is the ultimate competitor. Since then, he's watched Tom Brady win a Super Bowl, a guy who's only a year older than him, and a guy who the Saints beat, and they beat soundly at least one time, and they swept them this past season. So I thought the competitor in Drew Brees, he's going to take his time. And I heard this story about Brees after winning a state title in high school, knowing it was his last game as a quarterback. He was in the locker room a long time. Took him a while to kind of soak it in and know that, he wanted to cherish the memories of his last game in high school. We saw him do that in the Superdome. I thought he would retire, but I'm going to be honest. I wasn't sure the last couple of weeks, just knowing the competitor that Drew Brees is.
Yeah, Scott, I think you and I both felt the same way, having watched that interview with Mike here in the studio. You kind of figured this is it. He's really soaking it in. And then all of a sudden, a couple of weeks ago, video surfaces of him out in California pushing weights up and down a hill. And people are like, wait a minute now. I thought you were retiring with these bad ribs and lungs and age. And all of a sudden, he's pushing 200 pounds or whatever up and down the hill. And you start thinking, well, that's just Drew being Drew. And all of a sudden, people started thinking maybe he's going to try to come back again.
Yeah, I tell you, I agree with Mike. When you watch the way Drew left the last game, soaking it all in, looking over the left shoulder at the Superdome one last time, and then going out there and playing with his kids and Tom Brady meeting him after that game, after they lost to Tampa Bay, all the writing was on the wall that this was Drew's last game. Then you throw into that the cap move where he reduced his salary to help the Saints. Everything said Drew was going to retire. But I agree with Mike. And then when Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl, he comes to the NFC South, wins the Super Bowl. I'm sitting there thinking, the longer this thing plays out, I know Drew, anybody who knows Drew knows he's probably one of the most competitive people in the world. I'm sitting there thinking, is this guy getting himself back in shape to try to get another Super Bowl because Tom Brady came to the NFC South and won a championship? But I'm happy that Drew made this decision. I'm happy that Drew stuck with this decision, because when he was playing good football, he was still playing just as good as any of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL. It's just the injuries start to mount up. And I'm happy for his wife. I'm happy for his kids. I'm happy for the rest of us that we get to enjoy him as a broadcaster, because I think he's going to be one of the best out there.
Yeah, Monday morning he went on NBC's Today Show to make it official. Something we had already known was the fact that he signed a contract with NBC Sports. Everybody wondered if he would be the in-booth analyst. That might come down the line, but as of now, he's going to be in studio for college football. Of course, NBC has the Notre Dame contract, and then he'll also be in the studio on Sundays for Sunday Night Football. And what's very interesting, guys, when you look at the numbers, and we spent our last program, if and when the Saints lost, whether it was the Super Bowl or when it wound up happening as it did in the playoffs, we showed a lot of numbers from Drew's career, and we talked about the records. What's very interesting is people start talking about Father Time and did his time go? He threw in his last season 4 touchdowns for every interception, and he threw for over 3,000 yards. That I know a lot of teams would take that. But Scott, the problem is, start with you first, they're comparing Drew Brees 2020, 2021 to Drew Brees. He's not living up to his own numbers of 5,000 yards and 38 touchdowns and 42 touchdowns. But find me a team that wouldn't take a touchdown with a 4-to-1 ratio with touchdowns, better than 70% completion rating, and over 3,000 yards. The problem is he didn't live up to the Drew Brees he set the standard for himself over the last 8, 10, 12 years.
That's exactly right. We got spoiled, and NFL fans, football fans got spoiled by Drew Brees' greatness. You're exactly right. He made throwing for 5,000 yards routine. He made throwing or having a 70% completion percentage, which Bill Walsh always said, 65% and better, that's incredible. Drew Brees made 70% plus the routine, the standard. So because of that, we saw the evolution of this Saints team the past 4 years. They changed. It was not the same as we had in 2008 through 2012 with the vertical passing game, the down the field throws. We saw more of a running attack. We saw more of a surgical approach underneath routes. and that was due to the lack of arm strength. And that's just father time. No, father time is undefeated, but Drew still did what Drew did best. And I've always said, when the Hall of Fame time comes, to me, Drew Brees is the most accurate quarterback in NFL history. His completion percentage says it. His efficiency says it. And so that's how I will remember Drew, as being one of the most efficient and most accurate quarterbacks in NFL history.
Mike, a lot of people here in South Louisiana this morning echoing what Scott just said, and the fact that he broke the mold from this idea that you've got to be 6'2" to 6'5" in terms of height, 240, 250 with a rocket arm. Drew proved that you don't have to be that tall, and if you can complete 70, 74, 76% of his passes, like the numbers we've seen him put up, yeah, in 5 years, we might as well pack our bags and just go ahead and be ready to do a special edition of Saints Tonight, Canton, Ohio, because he's going to walk right into the Hall of Fame because of what he proved that he could do over his entire 20-year career.
Absolutely. And the real reason why he did an interview with me after 14 seasons, frankly, I made Brees look like he was 6'5" after every game. So it made him feel better after all that. But, when you look at Brees, he's much more than a Hall of Fame quarterback or future Hall of Fame quarterback. Think about this. He played for 15 seasons in New Orleans, guys. So if you're 25, if you're 30, if you're 15, all you've known is greatness from the New Orleans Saints. And if you're that age, your father, your grandfather saying, son, let me tell you, it wasn't always like this. I mean, right. Drew Brees changed what it was to be a New Orleans Saint. Scott Shanle came in right when Drew Brees did. He knows that. Absolutely. So, not only as a football player, but as a man, he comes in the year after Hurricane Katrina, the city of New Orleans. There's so much uncertainty, not only about the football team, but about the city itself. And then he gives so much back. And then he gives it back, to things like the oil crisis and the COVID. Time and time again, Drew Brees was much more than a football player. But if you're a young fan, that's all you know. And that should tell you something about his impact. My favorite number with Drew Brees, before he came on the scene with New Orleans, their lifetime winning percentage was third worst in the NFL. Since 2006, they have the fourth best winning percentage in the NFL. Says a lot about Sean Payton, but a lot about Drew Brees too.
Oh, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned Scott, because Scott was a part of that wave when he came in here and rejuvenated and brought football to what they wanted it to be. I think it was only 6 or 7 winning seasons before that turn. And I've joked with Scott before on the set and before some of our shows that if you have to live here to remember the days of Shoetown and Pizza Hut coming in to buy a pair of shoes and giving you 6 tickets because they bought 10,000 to lift the blackout. In the days of blackouts, it used to go to that Thursday deadline to see if the Saints game would even be televised. Now there's a waiting list by the thousands to get into the Dome and watch the Saints program. And it all started when that class came in 2006 and did what they've done, ever since then. Scott, I found it interesting, a quote from Zach Strief. When people talk about system quarterbacks, and I ask you because of a person, as a player, even though you were on the defense, and people talk about them, oh, it's a system. It's Sean Payton's system, and he's a fit. And Zach Strief, who, by the way, for those who haven't heard, little side note, now former radio announcer, he has now joined Sean Payton's staff and has left the broadcast booth. But Scott, it was interesting. Zach Strief said, you don't get it. Drew Brees was the system. He wasn't a part of the system. He was the system. He was the guy that before he was 2 steps from planting his back foot, knew he was throwing it 22 yards to the left while he was looking to the right. So this idea that he is a system quarterback, Zach Strief said, you're not getting the point. Drew Brees was the system, period.
Yes, and I will say, to add to Zach's point, as you're telling me this and I'm thinking about this, let me just tell you, under Sean Payton, he had quarterbacks by the name of Quincy Carter in Dallas. He had Kerry Collins in New York. Neither one of those two put up the numbers Drew Brees put up. So as much as I love Coach Payton and I love his offense philosophy and I love his system, that all didn't take off until he met Drew Brees. And Drew Brees was not the same Drew Brees in San Diego that he was in New Orleans. So give both guys credit. It was a match made in heaven, lightning caught in a bottle. And both guys coming together at the right time in their careers, because you got to give Drew a lot of credit. Like I said, he wasn't the same player in San Diego that he became in New Orleans. And a lot of it is due to his work ethic, the time, the commitment he put in, first in the building, last out. And I just think it's very special and very rare that you can take guys ages 20 to 35. And when Drew Brees stood up to talk to our team, everybody stopped talking. Everybody listened. Everybody, I think, became a better player, better version of themselves because they watched the way Drew worked. And when you have your best player in the building that's willing to go the extra mile, to sacrifice, to dedicate all the time, it just makes everybody, from the coaches, the training staff, the players, makes them be the best version of themselves. And I thank him, because I don't think I would have been the player I became just by watching him work, by watching him daily, getting feedback from him on the practice field. We'd be out there in OTAs or minicamp. When you come up to the line of scrimmage, you put your leg up like this, I know you're blitzing versus I know you're dropping. So tons of coaching points that Drew gave to players throughout the entire season to help us win on Sundays.
And Mike, before we move forward, kind of along that note, because you talk to so many players, not just Drew, each and every week, you think back to all the outstanding quarterbacks and Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and Aikman had Emmitt Smith and Michael Irvin. They both have yellow, gold jackets. Montana, Steve Young had Jerry Rice and a great backfield, and they all have gold jackets. With all due respect to the outstanding players that have been part of the Saints program, you don't see on any other Hall of Famers walking in and out of there from the wide out positions, the back positions, yet to Scott's point, you talk to these players and they all talk about how Drew elevated their games, which speaks even more to that leadership aspect that Scott's referring to.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, he didn't have a Pro Bowl wide receiver until Michael Thomas in 2017. I mean, think about that. All the numbers he put up. Granted, Marcus Colston should have been, but Marcus Colston was a 7th round draft pick, and he'll tell you Drew Brees made him a better player. Lance Moore will tell you that. Devery Henderson. So many wide receivers played with Drew Brees, would leave New Orleans and weren't the same player. A lot of people will say Tom Brady's the best quarterback of all time. A big similarity between Tom Brady and Drew Brees: they didn't have the big wide receivers. I know Randy Moss and Rob Gronkowski were in New England, but he didn't win a Super Bowl with Randy Moss. But Drew Brees did it, and he made guys better all across the board. And you ask anybody that played with him, they'll admit it too. So that just adds to his legacy. And, interviewing him so many times, I'll say this: Drew Brees was almost better, guys, after a loss. That shows what kind of leader he was, what kind of perfectionist he was. I remember when he set a record and he had one incomplete pass, he was kind of upset about that. He was, I should have had that one. That's what made him great. Shanle will tell you, first guy in the building, last guy to leave. That's the way he is wired. That's what made him great. I mean, such a great leader, such a great man in so many ways.
And in typical Drew Brees fashion, he announces his retirement using his kids in such the most adorable video to announce that he's going to step away and become the family man. And as so many people in New Orleans have said, and as they have it plastered on the Superdome and the light show, thank you, Drew, with the big number 9. And that's what everybody's saying in New Orleans and around the football world. But as it is, there is business to take care of. And no sooner does Drew Brees announce his retirement with this video and all the news goes about the numbers that Brees has put up, well, then it's announced as a 4-year, $140 million extension for Taysom Hill. Hold on now. Let's slow that roll, Scott, just a little bit, because now Mickey Loomis and company, they're starting to get all the wheels in motion, and they're doing that, I know, to delay payments and try to help with the cap situation. But let's move forward, as the Saints are going to have to do, because number 9 won't be in the huddle anymore. Jameis Winston, obviously still there, and they're saying they're working on a contract for him. Last year when Brees went down, though, it was Taysom Hill that got the call at quarterback. So, Scott, as you look at it now, moving forward, where do you think the Saints start leaning? Will it be Taysom Hill? Do we see Jameis Winston with more of a role, or is there a X factor, name that we're not seeing yet, or a possible move for the Saints at quarterback?
Well, there certainly could be an X factor. I don't think it's going to be a young guy in the draft. I think this team is still too good to lean on a rookie to take over. And I'm not sure there's a quarterback high enough in this draft that can just step in and take this team to where they want to go. So if you put me on the spot right now and said, who will be the week 1 starter? I think the obvious answer is Taysom Hill, just because he's under contract and he's already played a few games. So we've seen him. Jameis Winston, I would love to see Jameis Winston play some reps as a quarterback in New Orleans Saints. The problem is Jameis Winston, I think once free agency opens, is going to draw some interest from some teams because he's a young player. He's a former number 1 overall pick. He's been in New Orleans for a year. I think that's going to give him teams are going to give a lot of credit to that come free agency and be looking at signing him in free agency. So I don't know if one of these blockbuster trades are going to happen. You got Deshaun Watson out there. You have Russell Wilson. Teddy Bridgewater sounds like he's on the outs in Carolina. I just don't know from a cap perspective if the Saints can go all in and pull those type of trades off. So it could be Taysom Hill, it could be Jameis Winston. But other than that, I don't know if there's any other guy out there, basically because you're not drafting high enough in the draft and because of your cap situation.
Mike, with your Tampa roots, you've seen Jameis Winston a lot. We know he threw for thousands of yards and threw for 30 touchdowns. Of course, the public will look at it and say, yeah, he also threw 30 picks, but he's younger and he's got that potential. You've seen him play. Is this a guy that could fit in the Sean Payton system with the natural talent that he has, but could he reel in some of the mistakes just based on what you've seen because of you having been closer to him geographically when he was a starter?
Well, there's no question, Victor. Jameis Winston has exceptional elite talent, but he's still in prove-it mode. I mean, Bruce Arians couldn't fix him. Jimbo Fisher couldn't fix him, even though they won a national title at Florida State. He threw a lot of interceptions. Here's the thing with Jameis Winston. He's made so many bad decisions on the field and some off the field. His best decision was to take a dramatic pay cut and come to New Orleans, learn under Drew Brees, learn under Sean Payton. And you guys know this. Sean Payton plays the cards close to the vest, but he's been waxing poetic about Jameis Winston the past couple of weeks, especially around Super Bowl week. I think Sean Payton knows something. He talks to his quarterbacks. He promised Taysom Hill he'd get a chance if Drew Brees got hurt last offseason. He did that. I think he's still telling both guys, you know, you're going to get a shot, but it's going to be a competition. What's going to be interesting, as Shanle brought up, is the cap situation with the Saints. I mean, they've made all these moves. They're still over the cap. They're still trying to make this work. But I think the Patriots may have done the Saints a favor re-signing Cam Newton, because if you play musical chairs around the NFL, not a whole lot of chairs left. I mean, the Bears, you know, they may have some holes up there, but I don't know if they want Jameis Winston. They're probably holding out for a Russell Wilson type trade. And if Deshaun Watson leaves, maybe he'd go to the Texans, but I don't know if they're going to trade Deshaun Watson. So I think Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill are going to battle it out. Sean Payton has said for months, our future quarterback is in the building. I think he knows that. I think he believes that. I think Jameis Winston eventually will be the guy. And you know what? If he can change, Vic, if he can finally change, what an opportunity in New Orleans. You have the offensive line. You have Kamara. You have Michael Thomas. I think they'll draft some wide receiver that'll be good. If he can fix himself, he could be great for the Saints, because let's face it, Drew Brees, as great as Drew Brees has been, hasn't been able to throw downfield as much the last couple of years. Jameis Winston can do that. So the opportunity is there. We'll see if he can take advantage.
Scott, it's interesting Mike mentioned Cam, because I think a lot of people are looking at that Cam deal in another way, saying, wait a minute, if Cam's getting $14 million from the Patriots, even if it's heavy on incentives, Jameis Winston might be saying, wait a minute, I signed for $1 million and you let Taysom start ahead of me. I'm going to go fish the waters a little bit and see if any bites on a bigger contract.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%, because anybody who watched the Patriots play last year, anybody who watched Cam Newton play last year, I think would be shocked that he was able to get that type of contract. I know it's only a one-year deal, and you said it, it's very incentive laden, but he got another opportunity. I didn't even think he'd be back in New England. I thought that was going to be a spot for Jameis Winston, but I think there's a lot of teams around the league who are just going to look at Jameis's youth. They're going to look at his upside. They're going to look at the fact he was a former number one overall pick, but more so, they're going to look at the fact that he was under Drew Brees for a year, and he was in a room with Sean Payton for a year. And I think there's going to be an incredible amount of interest when you look at teams like the Denver Broncos. I think when you look at Terry Fontenot going to Atlanta, are they ready to move on from Matt Ryan and his contract? So those teams will elevate the contract that Jameis Winston's going to demand. And we've talked about it time and time again. That could put the Saints in a bind when it comes with the cap.
It's always fun talking Saints with you guys, and I know we won't be back in full until the season starts, but I know y'all are always still talking Saints. So you were nice enough to invite me on once. I'm here. I got time on my hands if you want to invite me again. But Mike, why don't you let everybody know where they can also hear some more Saints talk and more sports talk with both you and Scott?
Vic is referring to our podcast, which had the biggest jump when Victor Howell was on. It's our Been There, Done That podcast. You can catch on all the platforms from iTunes to Spotify to Stitcher. We're growing. We have some big news coming up as well. We have great guests like Victor Howell, obviously a lot of former players. Shanle, you know what's great about Shanle is he has great stories that I think he doesn't even think are great, probably because maybe he's told them with his boys over the years. You always get great stories out of Shanle. So check out our Done Dat podcast if you're a Saints fan. Lots of good stuff coming up. And I will say this about Jameis Winston, too. He may have opportunities out there, guys, but I think he knows his best opportunity is with the Saints. And I wonder if he'll take less money for that. That's a big question that we'll find to be answered in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's always interesting because there's the money aspect, there's the wanting to play, there's also the ego aspect. I know that's part of the game as well. You got that opportunity. They went with Taysom. Will they go again? We'll watch and see how it develops. Tell you what, we may not be back on the set in full until September, but how about we get together again on the CST social channels? Let's talk some more maybe after free agency, the draft, and we'll see what the Saints do. You guys up for that?
Absolutely.
Let's do it. That was a good time. Let's keep going.
We'll look forward to it. And on behalf, again, I know it might be way down the line before he even watches it, if he sees it at all. But for his years of service with us after each and every game, talking to Mike, we thank Drew for everything he's done and been our teammate for CST. And we look forward to Saints tonight from Canton, Ohio in 5 years when we watch Mr. Brees walk right on in. My thanks to our partners, Mike Nabors, Scott Shanle. Guys, it's great to see you all. Thanks for joining me to talk about Brees and his career, and we'll get together and do this again soon.